conferences before. I think you're going to find it a bit different this year. And there's a number of reasons for that. This year, we reorganized AFCEA International headquarters and increased our focus on engagement with our constituent communities, including Homeland Security. And Dr. Vince Patton, if you'd stand up for a second, Vince, is now our Vice President for Homeland Security Programs. He is former Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, the 8th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. He's also a PhD in education and has all kinds of skills that we leverage every day. But he's done a great job in pulling together our Homeland Security programs. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to restructure our Homeland Security Committee and make it a better resource for engagement throughout the Homeland Security establishment, not just the Department of Homeland Security, but all of the federal agencies, state, local, tribal, as well as the industry players in the expanded Homeland Security establishment. And we have reshaped the Homeland Security Committee to reflect that expanded community. And we're extremely pleased that the Honorable Paul Schneider, former Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, now a partner at the Chertoff Group, agreed to chair our newly restructured Homeland Security Committee. And Paul, thank you. Done a great job of providing a different flavor to that committee. So this year, you're going to see that expanded flavor. You'll also, given the timing, hear a bit about what's going on with budgets or no budgets and continuing resolutions and the threat of sequestration this week. You know, we're down to just a couple of days before sequestration will cut in. And then, of course, the end of the month, the termination of the current continuing resolution, and Congress will have to do something about that. And then next month, of course, the next round of debt ceiling discussion. So it's kind of an interesting period and interesting timing to have this conference. And I think a discussion of what's happening in Homeland Security would not be complete without understanding what the impact of all that will be. But you will hear from folks throughout this conference, from government, from industry, and from some non-traditional AFCEA partners, right? So you're going to hear from some folks in some of the critical infrastructure industries who have not historically been key players in AFCEA. We want to fix that. And so we're working more and more with the critical infrastructure industries, and you'll hear from some of them this week. I think also we'll try to bring the flavor of interagency into this, even beyond the Homeland Security establishment. So you know that our kind of national security structure in the United States is defense, Homeland Security, and intelligence. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, that's exactly the constituency of AFCEA. Those are the sub-communities that we work with, and we'll bring some of that flavor into this conference as well. So my charge to you is this, that this is not about 2.5 days of lectures. AFCEA's mission is to promote an ethical dialogue among government, industry, and academia around things related to C4ISR and IT across those 3 domains that I talked about. So the key word in that mission statement is dialogue, and you can't have a dialogue if it's only coming from the stage. So very important that you stay engaged throughout, that you ask good questions, and that you don't leave with any unanswered questions. And if we don't create that kind of an environment, then we will have failed. So that's your tasking, to not just sit out there and listen, but to engage and to challenge the speakers and the panelists and make sure that, that you walk away satisfied that you understand what's going on. Okay, so now to give you a more detailed kind of overview of the flow of the conference, I want to introduce Jim Flyzik. Jim is certainly well known to this community. Began his career in the Secret Service, spent a number of years as the CIO at Treasury. Many of you will remember him while he was CIO at Treasury. He was also the chairman of the Federal CIO Council. And then after 9/11, he served as a technical advisor to Governor Tom Ridge as he stood up the Department of Homeland Security in that function. And Jim has certainly stayed engaged with the Homeland Security community ever since that. From an AFCEA standpoint, he is a longtime AFCEAN. We were just talking this morning trying to figure out how many years he has kind of led or co-led conferences for us, and it turns out it's 15 years, starting back even before Homeland Security with the virtual government conference that we used to do. And then he's been involved in the Homeland Security conference since the very beginning. For a number of years, he chaired our Homeland Security Committee. He has stayed on to chair this conference and now runs the conference subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee. And so without further ado, Jim.
Thanks, Kent. Hello, everybody. Appreciate everyone coming out again. We've got another phenomenal event planned for all of you. It's going to be productive, but it's also going to be fun, and and we're going to get a lot of good content out. 15 years doing this. Why am I starting to feel older again? But anyway, talk about what's going to happen. As Kent mentioned, with the new structure, what we put together was a subcommittee. Paul participated, Schneider participated, as well as some others that had some institutional knowledge, some members of the committee itself. And we brainstormed on what would be the best way to structure this particular event in alignment with what Kent just said about the refocus at AFCEA itself. So as you can see from the agenda, the scope has been expanded dramatically. We've moved out to well beyond just DHS into the other facets of Homeland Security, to include state and local, to include industry and industry partners. So we think it's going to add a different perspective. I also think it's important because based on the budget climates and what we heard this morning and enterprise approaches and so forth, I think you're going to see more of this community working across boundaries in the future than we have in the past. I think the budgets itself are going to drive things that way, and so I think AFCEA is doing the right thing, getting out in front of that. Today, in the spirit of a little different perspective, we're going to kick off the keynote here today with the Vice President of Global Security at Marriott. So we'll hear what the world looks like from that perspective. And then the panels this afternoon are not too surprisingly. We heard this morning about cybersecurity being a plus up and a major priority. Our first two panels coming out of the box this afternoon will be on cybersecurity, followed by critical infrastructure and protection. And we are real happy. Some of the names on there might not be quite as familiar as some of the that you're used to, but based on the pre-work we've done, we've got some dynamic panelists on those panels coming up today. And of course, we're going to end today with the technology reception on the exhibit hall. We hope everyone stays for that. There are some great exhibitors out there. It's important for them too to meet all of you. I'll be back and talk more about tomorrow later at the end of today, but just to hit a few highlights, we kick off the morning with General Hayden, who was head at both NSA and CIA. Then we've got biometrics and identity. We've got information intelligence sharing. We've got some important presentations to make at lunch. And we have a gentleman named John Foss Morton who's going to speak at lunch tomorrow with a different view of Homeland Security. He believes in the future we need to look at more of a federalist kind of approach. So we'll add a little controversy to the mix. Get a few different perspectives out there, get us all talking about it and see what we think. And then we have the emergency management and mobile communications panels to close out tomorrow. Day 3, we have Rand Beers, the Undersecretary from Homeland Security, NPPD, and of course that's where the cybersecurity work resides. So I'm sure it will be a well-attended event, and bring your pencils and pens to take notes. We then do a session on training, simulation, and modeling, which is growing dramatically. Visualization of everything is becoming the norm now for a lot of things going on in IT. And we're going to end the day with the taping of the radio show like we've done every year the last several. This will be a CIO roundtable that I will moderate with the CIOs of DHS, DOJ, DOD, FLETC, and the District of Columbia. That one will be a lot of fun for those of you who attended those. It's a quick, fast-paced thing we do there. It's almost like a McLaughlin-style kind of a session. And just to reiterate what Ken has said, a big part of what this event is about is networking. Networking. We heard it this morning from the speaker this morning. It's important during the breaks, when one on the exhibit hall, to talk to one another, get to know one another, and network as much as you can. We're going to now move and have lunch. Following lunch, we'll be back with our speaker, so enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you in a little bit.